Bienvenidos, fans of the hottest entertainment on the planet. Jaimé En Fuego here, and this is the official conclusion of my individual film review coverage from the Fantasia International Film Festival 2026, the final count. And I was even trying to get some requests in the 11th hour, the final day of the festival. You know, there's still a couple screenings going on, and I'm like emailing Patricia, and I'm just like, hey, can I maybe get like one or two more? I'm right at the end, but nah, the cutoff had already transpired. But yeah, the final count is 34 films, and I will be doing a best of, so probably 10, or maybe I'll put this one to 11. And I ended up watching 34 films, and lo and behold, this final film ends up cracking that list. It is entitled Godhead, all one word. And so this is actually coming from writer, director, and producer, I want to say Mark H. Rappaport. And y'all, this was something else. Now, the trailer was very vague, and I saw some of the horror sites covering it, and so I was just like, okay, obviously we're dealing with some religiously charged stuff, and it's very avant-garde with the black and white, and, dealing with, as somebody who was raised Reformed Baptist Christian, so subsect of a subsect of a subsect, and all that business. My father was a Bible teacher at the place where I graduated from high school, spent the last 2 years, junior and senior year there and everything here in Phoenix. But so I was expecting sacrelicious, to quote Homer Simpson. But I just wasn't, besides the synopsis about twins and, showing up and having like a preacher and, he's rocking some twang. So I'm assuming somewhere in like the, southern, like Midwesty sort of area. But, then again, neither of the twins are rocking that sort of, accent or what have you here in the States and whatever. But everything was very vague, as far as like, is this going to be a deep discussion of faith? Is it going to be something very inflammatory that would upset a lot of people? How art house and avant-garde was it going to be? I did not see Mark's previous film, I believe it was Hippo, I think, that made some noise a few years ago, had Fantasia. And I ended up catching this virtually because, another year of coverage and another year with being here in the deadly desert of Arizona as opposed to up in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, where I would imagine the weather is significantly nicer than the hellscape that we have been residing in and, do on the annual in the deadly desert here. But so I watched a screener of this, and it was in fact the final film that I watched. And for it to crack my favorites of the fest is, especially after watching nearly 36 films, that is saying a lot. I was immensely impressed with this film, and so the acting from the guy who's playing the preacher, the reverend or what have you, extremely strong, man. And I love Garth Ennis' Preacher. Not so much the adaptation that AMC did, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg were behind. They kind of perfected that sort of thing with their superhero take with The Boys and whatnot. But, I just love that whole, a man trying to find his faith. Not to say that this is like some sort of virtuous character, but I like that angle of kind of a warts and all religious person that Okay, this is a very complicated character, and I would actually argue that he is the main character in this. And because when we initially meet him, he is kind of reading the scriptures that, well, not even so much like actually directly out of the Bible. It's more like a children's book with illustrations and stuff, like something I would have seen in Vacation Bible School, something like that. And he's going through, what God created on each of those first 6 days before resting on the seventh and everything. And so, you see some illustrations, and you can tell that he has an interesting, like, kind, sort of hearted, approach and like tenderness to him. And then, unfortunately, we realize as the narrative goes on and he encounters these weird adult twins, and they're, I'm trying to remember, it's fraternal twins, maternal twins, something like that. But, I mean, being a brother and a sister, they're not identical. And so, and they are grown-ups and everything. But they, when they show up randomly at his church and, he's like, oh, Mass has already happened and what have you. So, but they implore him for a few minutes of his time, which he graciously gives. But there is some connective tissue amongst these characters without getting into too much of it, and especially without getting into, I don't spoil things when I'm doing these sort of reviews and what have you, but these twins, most notably the sister who does all of the wagging of the tongue, flapping of the gums, whatever you want to say, she is very obviously like the more dominant of these two. The brother, and they're both wearing these weird jumpsuits, these weird white jumpsuits. It made me think of the Jimmies in the second. Well, you see them at the end of 28 Years Later, but they really play that predominant role in the Bone Temple, the sequel and stuff. But the whole film is in black and white, again, obviously, as I mentioned. And so, but sister runs the show, as you can tell. Brother seems like he's a little bit on the spectrum, potentially, at least as far as, he's very timid and quiet and everything, and you can tell that maybe there is like some very controlling, possible even emotional abuse, and maybe even something more going down with his dynamic with his sister, who takes charge and really kind of, she gets very forceful with this reverend, and you can tell that they don't just have a mean streak between the two of them and the sister specifically, but yeah, they potentially they have a potential, at least, for some really ill shit, without getting into specifics. And I'm starting to walk on eggshells because I don't want to divulge too much. But so he has a very unique relationship with that adolescent boy that he's caring for, and presumably his son, but actual son, adopted. You get some more details as the film goes on and everything, because he does mention being sworn to celibacy, as a man of the cloth and all of that other stuff. So I'm assuming this is Catholic, preacher, priest, what have you, being raised Reformed Baptist. The closest that I know to the full extent of Catholicism is the similarities between Lutherans and Wells and all of that Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Society. I'm trying to remember, but that's where I went to grade school before going into some non-denominational settings and whatnot. But Reformed Baptist churches, that's beside the point. This film is impeccably acted. We start to peel back the layers of the fact that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and there is definitely some nefariousness about this preacher, this priest, what have you, and yet you can tell that there is an essence of conviction, and I mean there is religious guilt. I mean, there's like a number of themes as I was going through this. I mean, there are also some. Okay, I can't mention that because that's something that I don't want to divulge, but there are some bold proclamations that are made by the sister of these two twins about the nature of the two of them, because, the Trinity is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. There are some bold proclamations that she makes about connections with the Holy Spirit, possibility about some imbuements and what have you, and I'm trying to be very, very vague and not give too many specifics, but I mean, her performance especially is very compelling, just like the preacher's is, the priest. And when those two butt heads, like he is initially turning the other cheek. He's being very meek, that kindness and temperance, that fruit of the Spirit. But as she becomes more forceful and says some pretty just going for the jugular stuff to him, obviously, of which we don't get necessarily like complete confirmation of, but that's when he starts losing it a little bit, and you can tell that his patience has been tested to the degree where she gets the desired rise out of him and everything. So you have this really fascinating, really engaging dynamic about the true nature of these just oddball twins that randomly show up. If I'm going to criticize the narrative a little bit, there is a little subplot with this girl named Maud who is showing up for guidance from the man of the cloth, who is our main character, at least in my estimation. And then, she has this alcoholic father who shows up. So it's a very underexplored subplot from Mark's script. And I would say that is maybe, because the film it's not super short. I watched a lot of stuff at this festival, barely over an hour. This is right around 100 minutes. I want to say like 98 in totality after the credits and everything. But I felt like that just wasn't properly explored. If you were going to have somebody in the community that he's trying to, and I guess as I consider it for just a second, there might be a possibility there as to some motivation behind just showing this one member of the community and what have you, especially with certain things that are discussed later in the film. And I'm sure Mark could give some insight as to that if I'd been able to take part in like a interview process or something. With this being part of the underground programming for Fantasia, and it was also a world premiere, and it did show twice. So there was the debut, and then there was also an encore screening of it. I'm sure that if there was audience Q&A or any press stuff done, where there were interviews taking place and whatnot, I would imagine that could have been clarified for me. But I kind of wish that if you were going to explore other members of the community, because this is low budget and a very, very small cast, aside from there's one full-fledged church scene in this, but explore a few other characters as opposed to just the one. But that was possibly of Deliverance, as I was just kind of figuring out in my head as I was thinking about it. But it really does boil down to the nature of this son of his, this boy that he's raising. It also that like, if what is being said is true by these very strange twins. But the thing that I cannot end this review without mentioning is how awesome, just righteous this film looked, because the choice of the shot selection with his DP, I just want to give a shout out to William Tracy Babcock, just exquisite. I was getting kind of some, the lens selection alone, the placement of the camera for a lot of these shots, and a lot of them are static, they're still shots and whatnot, but like weird, like fisheye sort of lens stuff, placing the camera in such weird areas of the room as the scenes are playing out, and then just the color correction, going for this tannish, dark, black and white, almost similar sensibilities to some things that I saw and in one of my favorite films of all time, Robert Rodriguez's Sin City. Now, it doesn't have dynamic infiltration of color in specific moments. I guess there kind of is in some... once again, I don't want to go into too many details because emphasis on that might give away a few things which I don't want to do. But I love the look of this film. It had this like overcast, dark, dreary sort of vibe to it, whether we're inside the church, whether we're sitting in a hearse, whether we're, inside the home where, this where he's kind of instructing this young boy and everything. I mean, there was just... It's so awesomely shot, and for underground, independent filmmaking like this, I mean, once again, I saw almost 36 films over the course and reviewed every single one of them between here and on the horror show. I mean, Godhead was awesome. I really dug this movie. It's not without its few flaws, no one is completely immaculate in said regard, and no one is without fault or blame or sin or what have you. But any of my nitpicks would be relatively minor, as I mentioned. And so that is my thoughts once again on Mark H. Rappaport's Godhead. It is definitely one that you need to keep an eye out for as it makes its way presumably through the festival circuit, and then if it ends up on, it's listed as a horror thriller. It's much more on the thriller drama side of things. I wouldn't go as far as labeling this horror. I personally wouldn't. And it was labeled that when they have the distinctions on Fantasia, they say usually where it would land, that's the first genre mentioned. And so to say horror thriller as opposed to like certain other films that I watched where it was like drama, like No Rest for the Wicked, for instance, where it said drama, horror, LGBTQ+, what have you. So it was like, it starts with the most important thing that they want to emphasize as far as categorization, and then they kind of go to, I guess the smaller associations and whatnot. This is listed as a horror first. I would politely disagree about that, much more so on the dramatic thriller side of things, but that's in no way to, cast shade or slight or what have you on Godhead. So I extend the grande gracias, everybody. I have been Jaimé En Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors, Twitter, X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok. All those places, although the last one, the Tiki Talkies, that's where I really just do short form, real sort of reviews. So big things in theaters, like the new box office all-time champion Spider-Man. I did review Her Private Hell, which is now in theaters, although not for long from what it's looking like. But the latest from Nicholas Winding Refn, that was actually the opening night film at Fantasia, which has unfortunately, as of this recording, been concluded for 2 days now. But it was a blast. I cannot, merci beaucoup, and thanks so very much. Immense gratitude from me being able to cover the event once again. Ted, Angie, Patricia, everybody who helped me out throughout the process once again between Enfuegotainment and the Horror Show channel. This is my send-off, at least until I do my best of video. So, man, it was an honor and a privilege once more. So, I've been Fuego, y'all have been Rat Status, and until the Reel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos, constant viewers, say thank you. I hope we have been well met and share more of this cinema palava sooner rather than later. And until the best of and the proper conclusion of my Fantasia coverage, adios.